Mountain Goats, one of the most unique and consistent and clever bands of all time for me. I really say that with true passion and true belief. They truly are one of a kind. Every album has its own story, every album has its own angle, every album has its own concept. They are like no other, and when it comes to writing, John Darneille is one of the greatest poets you will come across. Truly magnificent stuff. Just go and listen to the Sunset Tree. If you don't believe me, if you don't trust what I'm saying, listen to the Sunset Tree and tell me it ain't a heartbreaking album. Their discography is filled with so much unique material. Like I say, every album is its own sort of realm of John Darneille's mind, how he manages to always find something new to write about and keep it going for an entire album. It's super impressive. And yes, not every album is a masterpiece, not every album is a classic. You do not get much more consistent than the Mountain Goats. Yeah, and I was foolish because I held back on this one. I wasn't as excited for this because their past few albums have just been okay. But honestly, I should have gotten this sooner. This is their best album in quite a few years now, possibly even 10 years. I mean, that's no slight on their 2019 album In a League with Dragons. That's no slight on Goths. That's no slight on Beat the Champ. It's no slight on those albums. But in terms of fantastic writing and fantastic music, for me, since Transcendental Youth, in fact, this is the best work, because I love that 2012 album, and I think this is a return to that kind of caliber of brilliance. Immediately on first listen, I wasn't paying attention to the lyrics. I tend not to do that. I'm a bit of a FIFO, you know. He's always saying how he just lets the music play at first listen. I take the same approach. So for me, the music immediately struck me. I really liked how airtight the production was. Of course, John Darneille's singing was really good throughout, as it always is. I was just impressed with the way they were approaching music. It felt like it was sharper than the past few albums, catchier in fact too at times. But then when I was digging further into my listens with this album, I was really taken aback by the themes and the lyrics and the approach that they've taken this time around. So John himself has said in an interview that this album is basically filled with its own mini action movies within each track. You've got plots, you've got heists, you've got getaway cars, you've got the job lot basically, you've got fight scenes, you've got it all. Any kind of classic action movie you can think of is basically the concept to this album. Every track is its own mini plot, its own mini action film, maybe its own mini scene from an action film, even at times referencing older films too. And that's just such a fun idea, honestly. Like, as simple as I can put it, the idea of just doing that is super fun. And this is what I love about the Mountain Goats, man. You get the Beat the Champ, where, you know, the theme is looking at like pro wrestling. You get the Sunset Tree, which is a deeper emotional look into the growth of John as a young person and dealing with his stepfather. You know, you've got Goths, you've got all these just ridiculously varied concepts, and they just find something new to write about every single time. And the way that they just commit to the bit as well, they do not hold back. They just go straight in there and commit for the full album. And the upbeat, rockier tracks as well just really match these ideas, and you don't really get this with many other artists out there. You know, usually people are just, and it's okay, writing about, you know, their personal lives. So if they're making a concept album, it might just be a one-off concept album, and the rest of their discography kind of goes to something lighter. But no, the Mountain Goats just go full on in every damn time, and it's so good. And to make an album filled with these action references, it's just really fun. I mean, the opening track immediately, you know, this kind of idea that this person is training up to become this brutal fighter and get their revenge on someone, getting their revenge on someone for someone else. Perhaps it's a character who has, you know, had a loved one die in a film or something like that, and he's writing from the perspective of someone then trying to get revenge. It's just really fun. Make You Suffer, of course, coming from the perspective of basically someone attempting to make someone suffer. Again, you've got these kind of like evil, sinister characters in these kinds of films, but you've still got the kind of light, easygoing John Darneille vocals to go along with these depictions and these stories. And Make You Suffer is one of the funniest tracks to me because it just sounds so friendly, but then the chorus is probably one of the most brutal choruses you've ever heard them ever sing, and I just love that juxtaposition of those two things. Mark on You, of course, very simple. These fight scenes where you're leaving bruises, leaving your enemies, leaving the bad guy or the good guy, left to be on the floor with all these marks on them. It's very simple stuff, but again, just the approach, the simplicity. There isn't too much intricate going on here, but the concept again just makes it all feel fun, and the music itself sounds great. I mean, Wage War, Get Rich, Die Handsome has one of the best choruses I've heard these guys put out in years. It's kind of got this like youthful punky energy to it. The little references like, barrel forward unimpeded, it kind of reminds you of something more you'd see in like a video game, for example. But again, they're just committing to the bit so closely. And the chorus though, like I say, it's so anthemic. And it's got like such a great energy to it, and you just can't help feel but sing along to John singing. Guy on Every Corner, basically referencing the shootout scenes that you'd get in films, basically some kind of like mafia storyline, and you've got, people coming through, kind of like rolling through, pulling out the guns. You know exactly the kind of scenes that I'm referring to here. And it's just such a fun idea. Like I say again, like everything just feels so fun. They're not taking anything too seriously. They're just going straight in for these fun ideas, and it's making for great songs. I mean, the saxophone coming through on this track though, bloody hell, it sounds good. This is the other thing too, like all of these things would be fine, but if the music wasn't very interesting or it wasn't very exciting, you probably wouldn't really be caring about the lyrics all that much. But that's the thing. Extraction Point is a great example of this as well. The guitar just being left to breathe, and it's just kind of roaming free on its own, and it just sounds so great. Like I say, instrumentally, even without the concept, this is some of the best music I think these guys have laid down for some time now. And yeah, Hostages. The guitar on this track is, ooh, mamma mia. The Bruce Springsteen sort of, I guess, Heartland rock feel to it is great as well. It almost feels like a War on Drugs track as well, I've got to be honest, with the way it kind of like just elongates, and the guitars just sound so blissful. Anything that you've heard on the War on Drugs albums is kind of bleeding through onto this kind of track as well. The post-punk sound of Need More Bandages as well. It just sounds so angular and sounds so fresh for the guys. John even said, like in an interview, that he feels like it's one of their weirdest tracks ever in terms of how the guitars sound, because they've never really done anything like this before. And to be fair, when you do listen to it, it does sound very different for these guys. They don't tend to go in this direction ever. But on this album, I'm just sort of wondering if the creativity that comes through in the ideas, how much fun they're having with the concept, I just wonder if it kind of brought out some new ideas for them in a musical sense too. I mean, it's not new in terms of music generally. There are other artists and bands that have done songs like this before, but hearing these guys do these kinds of songs is great because they're doing it so well, and it's not something they usually do. They do seem to deviate from the concept on Incandescent Ruins, where they're talking about more like sci-fi type stuff. The depictions come through with like choking on the blood of androids and things like that. It's interesting because obviously sci-fi in its own right has a lot of action-packed scenes. Of course, just watch the Aliens film to know that. But it's interesting as well, like the fact that it is the one track that deviates from the rest of the more like typical action sequences and things. it does end up actually probably being the weakest track, but even still, I still quite like it. I just think it wasn't quite as fully fleshed out. It's a very short song, compared to like Hostages as well, which is like a 7-minute track, and then Bleed Out, which closes out the album, again is like a 7-minute track, and these two tracks for me are just some of the best ones. Probably the most detailed writing on Bleed Out as well, just very much depicting perfectly the kind of end of film or end of climax moment where the character's just on the floor left to die. Often in these films though, there's usually a way to kind of bring them back and they'll be okay in the end. But I feel like in this kind of different approach that Mountain Goats have taken, it is kind of just the end for the person, and it's really, really detailed. It makes for a really great long song too. And yeah, overall, man, I just think this is a really good album. Like, I love the ideas coming through lyrically. I love the instrumentals. That was the thing that caught me off guard immediately. Like I say, my first listen, I was really impressed with the music, and then once I explored the album more, I was just getting happier and happier the more I learned about this album, and just how fun it is. Who out there makes albums like this? I mean, a recent example to me is similar to this would be like Clipping, you know, with their albums, that they kind of take the horror tropes and flip them on their head. Excuse me. You know, that makes for really interesting concepts too. But even still, in the world of indie rock music or indie music or singer-songwriter music, the Mountain Goats are just in a league of their own, really, aren't they? They just have such a unique way to approach things, and it makes for the best music. Sure, it's super nerdy, but I honestly think you'd get a great lot of enjoyment out of this album just from a musical sense too. And like I say, the fun depictions of action sequences and stuff just makes for such a great album and just a really fun time, especially if you're like a film nerd too. Hearing something like this just puts a smile on your face. So yeah, one of the best albums of the year for me. I shouldn't have held back on it, but that's where we're at. That's how it is. I did, and I've got to it now, and I'm happy. 8.5 out of 10 from me, one of the best of the year, like I've already said. Thank you for watching. Please let me know what you think of this album in the comments. One of the best of the year for me. If you agree, disagree, please tell me why. Tell me why. Subscribe if you haven't already. Have a good day, and goodbye.